Hi, my name is Madeline. Welcome back to my channel. It has been a minute since I have filmed a video. Today we are going to be filming everything I read during the spring, which will be March, April, and May. I intended to do like a March-April wrap-up, but then there was a lot going on. My family went to Disneyland, which was really fun with my 2.5-year-old, and then like as soon as we got home we had a bunch of doctor's appointments, and then he had surgery to take his tonsils and adenoids out. So it's been kind of chaotic and I didn't really have time to sit down and record a video, but I did still have time to read some books. A fair warning ahead of time, I read 12 books within these 3 months, and 11 of them are Harry Potter, like part of the canon, or Harry Potter fan fiction. And so if you are not interested in that at all, there's only one book on this list that is not those, and so I'll put the timestamp here and then I'll see you next time. So basically this was kind of my plan at the beginning of the year, is that I wanted to read all 7 of the original Harry Potter books. I had read 1 through 3 when I was much younger, like 9, so it's been like 20 years, and then I never finished the rest of the series. And so I planned on reading all 7 so that I could read Manacled, because I had heard so much about this fan fiction book that takes place kind of like after the war, and it gets so much praise online, and I've never read any fan fiction before, and so I was like, wouldn't it be crazy if my first ever fan fiction that I read is this like top tier fanfic that people say like ripped their heart out like they were sobbing. And so I read all 7 Harry Potters in preparation for that, and then I read Manacled, and then I'll talk about it, but it really did break my heart. And so I was like, okay, I need to read another like Dramini book that people recommend reading right after to like heal your broken heart. And so I did that, and then I tried to pick up other books and it just wasn't hitting, because I still wanted to be in that world. And so I ended up reading, including Manacled, 7 full-length books that are all Dramini, which is Draco and Hermione together, which I'll get into it, but I have reasons for liking Hermione together, okay? So now that I've read 7, several of them being over 1,000 pages, I am trying to move past only reading Hermione and nothing else. It is a struggle though. Once you're in, I understand why people who read fan fiction are like, that's kind of all there is. So you kind of just get stuck in a rabbit hole. But anyways, moving on. Let's move into what did I read and my reviews. So if you haven't seen my January-February wrap-up, I read the first 3 Harry Potter books, which is the Sorcerer's Stone, The Chamber of Secrets, and The Prisoner of Azkaban, in January and February. So the first book I read in March was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This is Harry Potter's 4th year, so he's in 9th grade, and it is a book revolving around the Triwizard Tournament. So there's this magical tournament where kids from other schools come and you can put your name into the Goblet of Fire and you participate in these fantastical competitions, and then at the end one person is the winner, and it's just like huge accolades to your school. It's a big source of pride, and I think you also do get some money. And so you get 12 students from a school called Durmstrang and 12 students from, oh my god, where's Fleur from? Beaubat. So Harry ends up in the Goblet of Fire, and you get to see him do all of these tournaments, and at the same time, obviously things are progressing with the like overarching plot about Voldemort. It's fun because we get new characters and like a little bit more context of the world of like there are other magic wizarding schools where that's not really mentioned before this book. The first 3 books are just very different, and you get almost no context to the outside world. It's just all of like Harry, Ron, and Hermione's school shenanigans. And so I think this was her starting to introduce like, oh, there are other schools. Oh, here's some like more magical creatures and some like lore around that. And then as we get on with the books, you'll see with 5, it's just like, I think she realized she had a lot to catch up on world building wise. But anyways, this is just almost exclusively the Triwizard Tournament, which I loved. It is my favorite movie for sure. I think this might also be my favorite book. But once again, like, these books are not perfect. There are hours and hours and hours long videos talking about all the issues with this series, with J.K. Rowling, with the writing, but I did really enjoy it, and so I think I'm going to give this one a 4.5. There is some stuff in the tournament in the books that just feels like less serious than it does in the movies, specifically the like lake one. Oh, also Neville is criminally underused in the books, and I don't know if that was on purpose as like a, you know, from Harry's perspective, he doesn't really notice Neville. In the movies, the person that gives Harry gillyweed, which he needs for one of the tasks, is Neville. And that makes perfect sense because Neville, like, he's notoriously not great at things, but he's great at herbology. And he's been studying herbology because he got this book, right? And so then in the books, the person that gives Harry the gillyweed is Dobby. And I understand, like, in the movies or in the books, it's revealed that, like, oh, I tried to give this information to Neville thinking that you would get the information from him, but you just, like, ignore him, and so that didn't work. Like, the person gave Neville the book that would give Harry the answer, and it just didn't work, but I thought that was dumb. Anyways, love the book, 4.5. Then we have Harry Potter and the Order of the Pheonix. This book is so long. And, like, it's still a good book, but it feels so long. Let's see. It is nearly 900 pages. And what I was saying before about, like, I don't think J.K. Rowling realized how much world building and, like, exposition she would have to do. This is her trying to make up for that, I swear. So she got through books 1 through 4 and then was like, oh, there's so much more context that you need to this world. And, like, I've barely introduced any adults in this whole series, like, other than teachers and professors. There's almost no adults. And you don't know anything about the world, you don't know anything about the political system, and so this ends up just feeling like an exposition dump. And, like, it sort of makes sense because at the end of Goblet of Fire, you have, spoilers if you haven't read the books or watched the movies, but you have Voldemort comes back into, like, a body to full power at the end of the Triwizard Tournament, and he also, like, kills a child. And so the stakes are higher, and now suddenly, and, like, the kids are 15, 16, they're sophomores now in this one, and so it's like, okay, the adults are just now finally including the kids on things because, one, it is more pertinent, and two, they are old enough to handle it. But it feels weird that you've kind of never heard about any of this, and now all of a sudden you get 900 pages of just, like, info dumping of, like, what is the Order of the Pheonix? What are all of these adults doing? What is, like, the backstory? What happened in the first Wizarding World War? And so it's just, it's a lot, and it's a lot of exposition without as much of the, like, same kind of plot that you got in 1 through 4. And so it just feels very different. It was still a great book. I still love this movie as well, and so I think I would still give this book a 4. Like, it's still a really good book. Anything above a 3.5, it's like, oh, that's a great book, you should read it. I still think you should read all of these. It's just that I think this one is probably the weakest of the bunch for me, including the first 3, because I just think the first 3 did what they were supposed to, being, like, middle grade books, more than this one did what it was supposed to as a YA book. Does that make sense? I think there were better ways for her to introduce these ideas than giving us a 900-page book that introduced all of them at once. But we finally get to use Neville in this one, so that's good. And this one has the most infuriating character possibly ever. Next, I kind of had to take a break after Order of the Pheonix, and so I read People We Meet on Vacation. This was a buddy read with my sister-in-law, and I had never read a, like, strictly romance book before this, and so I want to kind of branch out the types of books that I read, because before this year I read almost exclusively, like, thriller, suspense, mystery, with some, like, lit fic mixed in there, a couple memoirs mixed in there, but leaning heavy on the, like, mystery thriller side. So I was like, I want to branch out. I want to find a romance book that I would like. I don't like smut or, like, spicy scenes. They make me uncomfortable. I think they're extremely awkward. And they're just, I don't like a lot of the words that are used in those kinds of scenes, okay? Anyways, so I read this. I thought that it was good. I enjoyed it while I was reading it. It wasn't overly long. It's almost 400 pages, which is, I think, a pretty normal length for a book. Anything between, like, 350 and 450, I'm like, great, I can knock that out. I really liked the male love interest in this book because he was, like, the kind of guy that brings a book to a bar, and little nerdy, homebody, like that's what I'm into. And so I liked him. He's blonde, and so the entire book I was picturing him not blonde because I'm not into blondes. The female main character, because of like, I'm sure she's super relatable to a lot of people, but she is not relatable to me. Like, we don't have very similar personalities or like thought processes, and you're in the perspective of her, you're in her head. And so I didn't find her super relatable, but I liked the love interest. And so I think I rated this one a 3.75, which is still a really good rating, and I think is probably a great rating for me for a romance. Does that make sense? Like, romance just might not be my genre. I'm still going to keep trying to read more romance, and you'll see down in this list that some of the fanfics that I read are very much a romance with like another plot also, but they're mainly just romance. And so I think, I don't know, I'll keep trying, but this was a good book. And I know a lot of people really love Emily Henry, and I've heard that Beach Read, which it mentions, is one of her best books, so maybe I'll try that one instead. Next, I read Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. This is the 6th book out of 7, and this is the one where we really start like building up to, you know, the big bad, the final boss fight. You kind of get more specific lore to that, and then you also kind of see the beginnings of the unraveling of Draco Malfoy. But again, because these books are written from Harry's perspective, it's like you can only see so much because you're seeing it through the eyes of a 16-year-old boy who this is like his rival. And so I'll get into it more when I talk about like Manacled and the rest of those, but I do think the exploration of other characters besides Harry and his 2 friends, and even honestly even his 2 friends, there's just not, like, there's so much potential there that wasn't seen through because we had all of this like lore to explain. And so we kind of explained lore and had these like little contained adventures and like doses of their daily life rather than really getting to explore them as characters and like their backgrounds. Like, an example, Hermione's parents don't have names. There are 7 books. Harry Potter is her best friend, and he doesn't know her parents' names. Or like really anything about her childhood besides that her parents are dentists and they're muggles. Like, what? So yeah, I think I could have done with more character development, but this book was still really good. I'm kind of a Dumbledore hater. I find Dumbledore, specifically in this book, infuriating. And so I think the way that he teaches Harry as if he has all of the time in the world is infuriating. There are plot holes for me of like, was he really that arrogant that he thought that the plot that he knew was against him would take so much time? Or did he just really not care? That doesn't make sense. I agree with Snape on when he says like, oh, so you raised him as a pig for slaughter. Like, I get it. The ends justify the means. You're saving like all wizarding kind by sacrificing this one kid. And like, he knew this going in, but like you didn't get attached to the kid at all. You don't seem to feel bad. And so that bothers me. But also, like, if he knew that there was this plot against him and that he has very pertinent information that needs to get to Harry, why not tell another trusted adult, like apparently he trusts Snape or McGonagall or something, or take all of these memories out, save them in the cabinet that Harry knows exists with the Pensieve, and then put a ward on the cabinet that allows only certain people, so like Harry, Hermione, Ron, Snape, and McGonagall maybe, or 1 or 2 of those people at least, to be able to get into the cabinet, because you can do that. And then all of those memories be preserved. But we'll get into it with Manacled, but if things had gone even slightly differently, they're going to be screwed because Dumbledore decided to take 5 ever to get to the point. Anyways, this book was really good still. And I liked it more than 5. So this is a 4.25. And finally, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. This is the final book in the original canon. I know that there are a ton of other J.K. Rowling Harry Potter universe books. There's Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. There's the books that follow Harry and Draco and all of their children. Blah, blah, blah. But this is the last one in the original 7. So this book is all about Hermione, Ron, and Harry, Horcrux hunting, and it all leads up to the final battle, the Battle of Hogwarts, and, you know, like the final boss fight. I really liked this one. I think this one is probably also a 4.25. I still think, maybe it's a 4.5. I think this one's probably 4.5. I think I like this one and Goblet of Fire probably equally. I don't know. So after I finished all of those, I jumped into Manacled, and after I read it, so I got it on AO3. It's great. The only issue is they don't usually have page numbers. They have locations, and so you have like absolutely no idea what page you're on or even how many pages the book is unless you look it up. You just know like the percent that you're in. But anyways, after I read it was my birthday and Mother's Day, and so my husband is so sweet, and he went out and bought me a physical copy on Etsy, and he thought he was buying a like hand-bound, not making a profit, just paying for the materials kind of book, which is still like a gray area. And unfortunately, this is definitely not hand-bound. And so it makes me sad that somebody's making a significant profit on Senlin Yu's work, but I have a physical copy now, and this one is like 800 pages, but look at the font. And so when you look it up, most people that hand bind this with an appropriate font make it about 1,200 pages. So this book is by Senlin Yu. The beginning is years after the war ends. The middle is during the war, but the war has gone on years longer than it did in the original canon because of the fallout of Dumbledore dying earlier. And then the end is back to after the war. This book has pretty much every trigger warning that you could possibly imagine. So I would definitely look up the trigger warnings. The beginning is very purposefully Handmaid's Tale kind of vibe, and so that can be extremely triggering. But this, I told my husband when I first read it, I was like, I feel like I have been conditioned to think that I should be embarrassed that my favorite book of all time now is fan fiction, and I'm absolutely not embarrassed, because this is the best work of fiction I have ever read in my life. And I mean that plot-wise, character-wise, the development of characters, the writing itself is so good. There are so many quotes in this book that I've like that line alone changed my life kind of thing. And it's just, this book is fantastic. I cannot rave about this enough. This is the easiest 5 stars I've ever given. I know some people will say like, oh, if it's more than a 5 stars, it's a 6 stars. In that case, this is a 6 stars. This is one of the best books I have ever read, if not the best book I've ever read in my entire life. And the characters, the way that they develop from the original canon just makes sense to me. The directions that they go as young adults just make sense to me. It's just so good. And like, I cried so many separate individual times in the middle book of this book, and like the flashbacks, which is about 50% of the book. It hurts, and you relate to Hermione. You hear what's going on in her head. She just feels forgotten. She feels taken advantage of, and she has every right to in the original canon as well, but especially in this world in which the war drags on, and your heart aches for Hermione. And then you hear like the perspective of Draco, of what was happening to him as a child and during school and in the early days of the war, and his perspective, and it just makes sense. And I really, in the first 25% of this book that is like current times, I very much was like, how on God's green earth are they going to redeem Draco as a character? Because I was horrified. I was like, there is no way to redeem this. And there's still a part of me that is horrified, but Senlin Yu somehow managed to do it. And it's just, it's heartbreaking. I implore you, if you think that you can read a 1,200 page book, please do. It was so good. This is my favorite book of all time. Easy 6 stars. And made me want to continue reading Hermione. And I'm going to be a fan fiction fan forever now because of Senlin Yu. Also, she reworked this book because obviously you can't publish works with copyrighted characters, and so she completely reworked the book, and it is being published as a book called Alchemized instead of Manacled, and it is coming out next year in 2025. And so if you want to read Manacled, in its original form. You have until the end of this year, December 2024, to go on AO3 and download it, and you will have it forever as long as you save it somewhere that you can always access it. I have it saved in my Kindle app, but I'm also saving the PDF on my laptop, just in case I ever do want to get into book binding and bind that one myself. But fantastic book. If there's any book in this video that I recommend, it's that one. If you haven't read the original 7 books, the movies are honestly very close. They're pretty good adaptations. The information that you would need, you can get from the movies, and so if you don't want to read all 7 books first, you don't have to, but I really recommend that you read this. And I will be buying Alchemized when it comes out to read it again, but also just to support Senlin Yu, because she is amazing. She's a fantastic writer, and she deserves all of the praise and recognition. It's just, this is so well written. Anyways, so after Senlin Yu ripped my heart out of my chest and stomped on it, I needed to read something else to heal my broken heart, and the one that I saw recommended time and time again to read after Manacled was Draco Malfoy and the Mortifying Ordeal of Falling in Love. I loved this one. This is post-canon war, so the war ends as it did in the original canon, but years have passed and they're now like 24, and Hermione is like a renowned researcher, both in the Muggle world and the Wizarding world, which checks out to me, and Draco is an Auror, and you just get to see them, you know, they're put together via fate, and you get to see their like weird banter and them slowly becoming friends, and it's written from Draco's perspective, and so you just see him like slowly falling for her and like being mad at himself for being a simp, and I love simp Draco, and so I really appreciated this one. Very well written, very cute, so many moments where I was like giggling and kicking my feet, and the overarching plot of like, it's like a mystery adventure kind of plot, is also very good, and I thought very fleshed out, makes perfect sense if you've read the original canon that it would pan out this way, and I just loved it. I love seeing the character development of Draco after the books end, because like I said, I think there was so much potential for him as a character, and you know, the whole theme of the original 7 books is like good over evil and love conquering evil and the lust for power and all of those things, and I think the perfect example of that could have been Draco Malfoy, because he was raised in this extremely bigoted, blood purist, basically cult, and his mother was raised with the same ideals, but then at the end of the canon, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione are captured by Snatchers, he could have easily said, yeah, that's them. Like, he knows it's them, but he, in his own small way, tries to spare them or save them from Voldemort coming right away, and so he says like, oh, I don't know if it's them, and that is him very, like, that took some bravery. That's him going against the grain. And then his mom, Narcissa, in the Forbidden Forest, she goes up to Harry to see if he's still alive, and she asks where Draco is, and she lies directly to Voldemort and says that he's dead, because all she cares about is Draco, and he is the #1 person. Like, she would watch the world burn to save Draco, and I think that even in the original canon, Draco is so like Narcissa's baby boy, and like she would do anything to protect him. And so I love, one, seeing Draco's character development after the war, because he's already kind of started to unravel his own like bigotry of his childhood, and seeing him like kind of try to make up for the sins of himself and also of his father and his family, and how difficult it would be for him to do that, but also how much potential he has as a good person and as someone who is extremely intelligent and witty and ambitious and has the same sense of humor as Hermione, like very quick-witted, and so the banter is just so good because they are very similar but just raised in absolutely opposite circumstances, and so I like seeing that development. And then I also like, in a lot of these fan fictions, but not all of them, seeing supportive Narcissa, because I really think that she would be after, you know, the war ends, and I don't think Lucius would ever come around, but I do think that Narcissa would be very like Draco is baby boy kind of thing. and, you know, would do anything to protect him and see him happy. So Draco Malfoy and the mortifying ordeal of being in love, I would give that one a 4.5. It was absolutely fantastic. I will absolutely read it again. So cute, great plot. Love the banter, love the internal struggle of being a simp. After that, I read Love and Other Historical Accents. So in this one, Draco and Hermione work in the DMLE, and they're working together on a project where they're testing like dark artifacts, and they're also working with like time travel. And they're kind of the only two people in this new department, and they end up going back in time, and they are stuck there because the time turner broke. And so you kind of see them like trying to get back to their own time while also interacting with people from this present time. There's like, I don't normally like the miscommunication trope, and so there's a specific scene in this book that takes place at a ball, but the miscommunication, it's like it involves like 6 people, and you're just like, oh my god, like I was cringing so hard, but it's so funny, and it's like, it's not trying to be overly serious in that part, and so you're like, oh my god, but it's so good. And I love, again, just like the banter, and like they worked together for 2 years and know nothing about each other's personal life, because Hermione's like, we don't talk about our personal lives at work. A lot of drama, again, miscommunication, but it's really good. I really enjoyed it. I think I would give this one a 4.25. Definitely would read again. Next, I read Amor, Vincit, Omnia. This one, if you are a Ron hater and you would like more reasons to hate Ron, this is the one I recommend for you. I think this one is really good. I liked the premise of like, again, Hermione is like very successful in her career. She's a researcher, and Draco is an Auror, but he's been an Auror in the US, and Hermione kind of becomes friends with his friends after a falling out with the Weasleys, and so she's kind of gets thrown into this friend group, and she's trying to find herself again, and like what real like unconditional friendship kind of love would feel like. And then Draco comes back and gets assigned to protect her, and all of the things ensue, all of the feels. It is so good, it's so cute. I love the found family vibes in this story. I love the friendships, Theo and Blaze and Pansy and Luna. It's just, it's so good. I really, really, really enjoyed this the characterization of Pansy Parkinson. I really, really loved. I love Narcissa in this one. Fair warning, I despise the characterization of Ginny in this book, and I don't agree with it even being a possibility of like a direction that her character would go, but it is absolutely necessary for her to be the way that she is for the story to exist. It just doesn't make sense. If Hermione were to still be close with Ginny, then this story wouldn't happen. So I'm willing to accept it, but I wanted to scream every single time Ginny was on page. But, hot take, I don't think that the characterization of Molly is super wild, Mrs. Weasley. And my evidence for that is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and I will leave it as that. And it's really good. I think this one's a 4.5, but as I started reading more fan fictions, I will warn you, if you don't like smut or spice, the only one that really didn't have a lot of it was Manacled. There is SA in this one, and there is some consensual activities, but it was written in such a way that I actually wasn't super cringing at this one. I did cringe in some of these other ones, but it's like I'm learning to just skim it, and it's fine. And the rest of the story is so good that doesn't even matter. It's not like the entire book is spice or smut, and so you can skip over it and still thoroughly enjoy the story. I absolutely love this one. So yeah, I'm gonna give that one a 4.5. One of my favorite things about this one is how it ties into the past when they were in school, and like Draco and Hermione's interactions when they were actually still at Hogwarts. Hi, Editing Madeline here. Something I was trying to explain when I filmed a couple days ago but was doing a poor job of is one of my absolute favorite things that a lot of fan fiction does is introduce new information that happened at the same time as the original canon but that we didn't know about because the original story is told from the perspective of Harry, who is a biased narrator and who also can't possibly know everything that everybody else is doing, saying, thinking at all times, because he has enough going on and enough to deal with himself, and also like 40% of that boy's thoughts are about Quidditch. And so they'll weave in things that other characters were doing or thinking during the years that they are at Hogwarts, but that we don't know about because Harry didn't know about, and they'll work with the canon. They don't contradict the canon or change the canon at all. It's just that we didn't know about them, and I find that extremely fun because you don't really get a like well-rounded picture of most of the characters other than Harry. And I think that while a lot of fanfic does this, I think perfect examples are Manacled and Amor, Vincit, Omnia. And so in Amor, Vincit, Omnia specifically, there's like flashbacks to the years that they're at Hogwarts, and I just absolutely love them. And there's a specific instance that involves Professor Flitwick that I absolutely adore. I actually wish that it was a longer, like more detailed and developed part of the book, but I understand why it wasn't, because this author just had so much other stuff that they wanted to do with this story. I would absolutely love to just read that specific instance like as an 80-page one-shot with just like great detail and like more dialogue and stuff. So if you know what I'm talking about, the instance in this book with Professor Flitwick, the thing that he orchestrates, right? If you have a one-shot recommendation or another book recommendation that just has that instance or that vibe, please recommend it down below because I love it. Yeah, and I love how like the reveal that they find out later as adults about that circumstance with Flitwick, I think is so funny. As a former teacher myself, it is not far from the truth. So yeah, just very fun. I love when you get like kind of a flashback to Hogwarts days about something that Harry didn't know about. The next one I read is called Isolation. This is, the premise is basically after Dumbledore dies, instead of going Horcrux hunting with Ron and Harry, Hermione gets sent back to school for 7th year to kind of help hold down the fort with McGonagall and be like a person in the order that is in with the students and what's going on there. Basically, Malfoy has been on the run with Snape because Voldemort found out that Malfoy failed his mission and Snape had to kill Dumbledore instead. And so he was on the run, and then in the fall, Snape is like, I can't do this anymore, we need to just hide him here at Hogwarts. And so they end up hiding Draco in Hermione's like basically apartment because she's head girl. And so she has like a 2-bedroom with a kitchen and a living room, like living quarters by herself, just in case both head boy and head girl are from Gryffindor. There's 2 rooms, and so she's not using one of them. So Draco's in that room. He doesn't have a wand or his magic, and you kind of see that unraveling, and then eventually they have to part ways. More stuff from the canon gets interwoven in, and it's really good. I think the writing in the very beginning was kind of rough for me because I think this author thought that if she used people's names over and over again that it would feel repetitive, and so instead she would be like, said the brunette witch, said the older witch, said blah blah blah, and she would use like these weird ways to describe who was talking, when I think it would have felt less weird and less repetitive to just say Hermione, McGonagall, Draco, blah blah, because I think our brains kind of block that out when we're reading because it's kind of just necessary, and so you don't register it in the same way that you don't register the words like the and of. And so the very beginning of the book, like I wasn't sure if I was going to like it because it was just tough to read the dialogue in the very beginning, like the first chapter. And then after that, it got really good. I really enjoyed it. Once again, had to skip over like spicy scenes, not only because I thought they were cringe, but also because of the time that they are written. Hermione is 18 and Draco is 17. They're just way too young for me to be reading spice about. And so that made me uncomfortable, where like most of these other fics that I've read, they're aged up to be like 24, 25 at least. One of these, they're 29. So yeah, I just skipped over those. But again, I really liked the characterization of Draco and him kind of struggling with his mental health, with his prejudices, with the things that he has done. And then also Blaise and Theo are in this one, and Luna's in this one, and I like when some of these other like Slytherin characters that we see hanging out with Draco but know absolutely nothing about, I like when they kind of get interwoven into the story. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. I think Isolation I would give like a 3.75. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. It was a long book and I still read absolutely every page, and I read it very quickly. Next, I read The Auction. This one is post-war if Voldemort won, and it is exactly what it sounds like. A lot of the students and like young adults get captured and put up for auction who were like part of the Order and fighting against Voldemort, both boys and girls. The boys are kind of being sold for auction and used as like basically like a house elf, like they do manual labor, or they end up like fighting, like imagine like illegal boxing rings, but they are slaves. So that, and then the girls are put on auction for exactly what you would think they are, and if you are a virgin, it's automatically $5,000 more. And there's so many trigger warnings for this one as well. It is horrific to read some of these things, and once again, it's just like Hermione's so oblivious to why, like, obviously, okay, you obviously know Draco ends up buying Hermione at auction, right? And she's like, I guess he just bought me so that if the Order does, and like the Resistance does overthrow Voldemort, then they'll have like a guardianship because he bought me and he kept me safe. And it's all just like a political tact move, and like, girl. And so you slowly learn like Draco's motivations, I guess, even though we know his motivations right away. There are some disturbing scenes leading, like, before Voldemort gets there and when Voldemort comes in to check on them. But a bulk of this book is like Draco and Hermione developing this weird, awkward, stilted friendship, which then turns into a relationship, and doing a lot of research together. This one actually has both Narcissa and Lucius are kind of redeemed characters, and so Narcissa definitely more so, but you kind of get to see Lucius be not so awful in this one, and I really did enjoy that. Also, this one has like a good chunk at the end where, like, I thought it was going to end, but then we still got even more information, and I actually really enjoyed that because the end of this book became very like fleshing out the political aspect of it and how Hermione would be involved and really be an advocate in how the world looked post-war politically, and the judicial system, and like the justice for Death Eaters who committed war crimes and crimes against humanity, and how they would still deserve a fair trial, and all of that kind of stuff. And I thought that was super interesting, and I really appreciated that being fleshed out and not just being like implied or left on a cliffhanger. And so I very much enjoyed that, and I thoroughly enjoyed seeing somebody try to redeem Lucius and it actually being successful and not super unrealistic. Like, he's not completely redeemed by any means. He's still an ass and he's still a terrible person, but he ends up being of assistance and kind of deferring to the judgment of his son. And so I appreciate that a lot. And then the very last book that I read is called Remain Nameless. Yet another Draco and Hermione post winning the war, but it is 10 years after. And so Hermione is like 27, 28, and Draco is turning 27, 28 because he has a late birthday in like June. And so basically they run into each other at a Muggle coffee shop, a Muggle cafe, and Draco has been in therapy for 10 years, but he still struggles hardcore with so much like self-doubt, and just is extremely cruel to himself in his own head, and still has a long way to go. And so they run into each other at this coffee shop. They end up getting coffee with each other every morning for months and months and months, and just having this like comfortable, uncomfortable friendship, but we're not naming it a friendship. It remains nameless kind of thing. And then obviously eventually they end up in a relationship with each other, and then you see kind of like the fallout with their friends and blah blah blah. And I love this book for the most part. I thoroughly enjoyed, I would say, the first half. I really liked the like banter and getting to know each other and like being awkward. And then also when they first started dating, once again, you're gonna have to skim over the smutty parts if you don't like smut. It happens several times. But I think at the end it started to drag for me, when like we get to milestones in their relationships that I should be very excited about. It started to feel slow. And I think possibly it's just that they were like, they could have been two distinct books. And again, like most of these are very long. A lot of these are over 1,000 pages. And so I would look up what the page count should be before you read them, if you're concerned about length. But yeah, I think it just started to drag at the end, but I still really enjoyed it. And I absolutely loved the beginning part. So I think I'm gonna give this one a 4. Once again, all of these, I read 7 fanfics and not a single one of them was below a 3.75. And so I just want to encourage you, if you have never read fanfiction, if you have this like stigma in you about fanfic as being like poorly written, throw all of that out the window and try one of these 7 that I mentioned. You can be a fantastic writer and write a completely original story that like flushes out these characters better in some cases than J.K. Rowling did in 7 books. You can flesh them out in 1 book and have so much character development and have so much emotion and plot and heart. And a lot of these flesh out the magic system better than J.K. Rowling ever did, and like made up for a lot of plot holes that she left open in her books. And the only reason these people aren't published is because they happen to be passionate about writing about characters that already existed. And if it weren't for that, I fully believe that all of these books could be published. And I am so happy that I made my way into the fanfiction world. I'm going to keep reading fanfiction, but I am going to try to, over the next couple months, read some more like published works, work on my physical TBR, this is my physical TBR, so that I can have some content to put out for you, for people who are not specifically interested in Hermione fanfiction, because I kind of got stuck in a rabbit hole. But if you are still here, thank you so much for watching. It was great talking to you today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.